Hi there, this is Solid Children Films, and welcome to another Top 10. I apologise for not doing many Top 10s recently, but this one is quite a special one. It's a personal favourite, and it's the Top 10 Takeshi Kitano films. Now, Takeshi Kitano is still more well known in Japan as Beat Takeshi, a comedian, but in the late 80s, early 90s he started making feature films, and these are some of the most singular and jaw-droppingly beautiful slash violent ever made. Now, a word about his violence. Kitano hates video games with a passion, and he hates films that portray violence in a video game type manner. So his films are violent, but his films are shot very truthfully when it comes to violence. Violence will just break out in his films. There'll be a scene that's very quiet, and then there'll just be a burst of violence. There's no Mexican standoffs in his films. Characters literally will just stand shooting each other until one or all of them just fall over. There's no extended shootouts. There's no Heat shootout with Michael Mann across streets. It is very abrupt. It's very short, and it can be shocking to people that are used to the traditional, let's just say, Hollywood way of shooting violence in slow motion and blah blah blah. Kitano, his films are paced in a way that perhaps for a Western audience might take a little bit to adjust to. Some people might view his films as slow. There's not a lot of camera movement. There's kind of just lots of long shots. There's lots of shots that are held. There'll be kind of long tracking shots, but there's a definite rhythm, and his films are kind of unique. He's made, I believe it's 17 feature films, and you can kind of split them between his more, I don't want to say arty, but his more poetic films. A lot of them don't actually have him in them, and then the other ones are more Yakuza based, gangster based, your more traditional kind of violent gangster films, if you want to call it that. But they all have that Kitano touch. They all have that Kitano not quirkiness, but just his individuality to them. His main collaborator after his early films, as far as music, was Joe Hisaishi, who also does Studio Ghibli films. And there's a nice soundtrack album of Hisaishi meets Kitano, which I would recommend for those of you who are interested. And Hisaishi's music gives his films a melancholy. There's they're kind of gentle, understated scores, beautiful in their own way, but they do kind of underline a kind of melancholy to them. So that's kind of the background. I think the first Kitano film I saw was Violent Cop, which features in this top 10. I have done a random review of Violent Cop, and it just blew me away. I mean, I'd still seen a lot of Japanese cinema by that time, but there's just something about Kitano's pacing. There's something about the way in which Kitano cuts his films. A lot of the violence in Kitano's film it's in the edit. So you'll see Kitano, then it cuts to a character, then it cuts to chopsticks lying on a table, and then it cuts to Kitano, then it cuts to the character, and then it cuts to the character lying on the ground with chopsticks in his eye. So you haven't seen the chopstick going in his eye, but you feel the chopstick in his eye, and it's just done in the cutting. So yes, some people might say Kitano's films are violent, and they certainly are at times, but a lot of the violence is in the cut, whereas other filmmakers just show all the violence. Kitano's films are very assured. When you're watching them, you do feel as though he is the singular voice involved. He knows what he's doing. He's in charge. He's in control. So his films are they're just so beautifully framed, beautifully paced, and they're just wonderful if you get into the mindset. You know, if you go into his films wanting slam bang action and things like that, he's not that kind of filmmaker. He's not showing violence as entertainment. You could, critically, you could say he's maybe a two-trick pony, and a lot of his Yakuza films maybe merge into each other. And that might be true to an extent, but I think at his best, they do stick out. So without even more rambling, because I've done enough of that already, let's start this top 10 controversially with number 10. And this is Outrage, which is part of a trilogy. I have still yet to see part 3, and part 2 was Beyond Outrage, and part 3 is Outrage Coda, I believe. And this is one of his kind of, I won't say standard Yakuza film, but it's kind of a more straight ahead Yakuza film, about taking over turf, and Kitano's character is usually an outsider, even within the Yakuza system. And there's a reason this is at number 10. It's not his best Yakuza film, and certainly Beyond Outrage I enjoyed even less. I don't know what the third instalment will be. Outrage does have some nice set pieces, and of course his standard way of shooting is still there, and it's quite beautiful. But this feels like he's going over old ground, and old ground that he's done better in. It lacks the kind of artistic flourishes that we're used to in his other films. So this is maybe not the best film to introduce yourself to Kitano, because watching this you might not go any further. It's a good solid film, but certainly nowhere near his best. So moving on, we have number 9, which as you'll note is just on DVD, and this is Brother. Now this is an interesting little film because they actually shot it in LA. This is, I believe, his only film outside Japan, and he has been sent over to the US. Lots of his characters get banished for bad behaviour, and he gets sent over to the US to help out a family there. And again, it's not his best film, but it has his usual black comedy. It has wonderful set pieces, especially in a diner. At times it's actually quite moving. And sadly, it should actually be on a Blu-ray release. I'm not sure why it's not. I think there is like a German Blu-ray release, or please let me know again in the comments if there is any Blu-ray releases of these films. Well, the ones aren't already in Blu-ray. Yeah, again, not his best work, but still highly enjoyable, and certainly worth checking out after you've checked out maybe the top 5 in this list. Number 8 is Boiling Point. This is his second film, and this is the first film where he kind of mixed his kind of Yakuza leanings with a more artistic, expressionistic way of shooting films. The lead character holding the baseball bat here is a bit of an idiot who doesn't really say a lot, and he offends a member of the Yakuza at the garage that he works at, and that leads to machinations, and him and his friends go out of town to get some guns to defend themselves, and they meet Takeshi Kitano's character, who is a bit strange, a bit violent, a bit unpredictable to say the least, as his kind of sidekick will attest to. Again, this is the first kind of flourish by Kitano of his expressionistic nature. There's a scene where they kind of break down and they just go into the grass and find some nice flowers to wear as headdresses and things. So it's kind of the first taste of the expressionistic side of Kitano that breaks away from just your bog standard Yakuza films. Again, it's brilliantly edited, but it maybe just lacks that little something that makes it great. Most of the characters Kitano plays, there's a real fatalism to them, there's a nihilism to them. I think that's why I'm kind of drawn to his work, because I do love a bit of fatalism, and nihilism are two of my favourite isms. And this one certainly has that. So for me, this is his first really interesting film. Certainly the first film on the top 10 that I would certainly highly recommend you checking out. But again, it's deliberately paced, beautifully framed, beautifully shot, and with a nice ambiguous ending. So number 7 is Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman, and Kitano doing a remake of the classic 60s and 70s series of films. This is a steelbook edition, and this is Kitano at his most playful. It might not work entirely, but it's just so beautifully done, so beautifully shot. He is atypically, his hair is blonde in this one, and he finishes the whole thing off with a musical number, which is both surprising and strangely quite wonderful. And this just follows, if you're familiar with the Zatoichi stories, the Blind Swordsman, and the adventures he gets in. I'm not going to say much more about that. And it's full of trademark Kitano humour, and just looks beautiful, sounds beautiful, and it might not be his most meaningful film, but it's just a blast, and check it out. So the next one on the list is Kid's Return. This is the Third Window Films release, which has quite a few of his films. And this is the first film, this was his third film, and this was the first one he made without himself in it. And it's the story of two boys who grew up together, and one of them becomes a boxer and one of them becomes a member of the Yakuza. And it dips backwards and forwards through time, and it's a really enjoyable little film. Again, once you get over the fact that Kitano's not in it, it is a great little film. Kitano does kind of, whenever he's on screen in his films, there's an unpredictability that happens, so you're always on the edge of your seat of what he's going to do, because he literally could do anything. And like I said, once you realise that he's not actually in this, that element's maybe gone, but this is still a lovely little film, and it's one of these films that actually has an emotional core, which some of these Yakuza ones you might say maybe lacks a little bit. So that's Kid's Return. So the next one in the list, if I don't knock everything over, is number 5, and it's Kikuji. Now this stars Takeshi Kitano himself, and he gets inveigled in to look after a young boy. And this is just 2 hours of the lighter side of Kitano. But as in the case with Kitano, there's always a kind of darker underside. There's always black comedy. A paedophile turns up halfway through. So this is his most kind of free flowing. It's not as structured as some of his other films, but you can't watch it without a smile on your face, and it's highly recommended. Again, this is the Third Window release of it. It's just a great wee film. Number 4 is the highest ranking film without Kitano. This is Dolls. I just absolutely love this film. Again, this is the Third Window release. And this is Kitano at his most expressionistic. The first 15 minutes of this is puppets, which is quite moving in itself, and then it kind of follows 3 kind of sets of characters on a story about redemption and love and many other things, and it's just absolutely beautiful. again, if you're looking for a rollicking plot or whatever, then this isn't the film for you. This is a film I saw probably fairly recently in the grand scheme of things, but I wish I'd seen it earlier, because it's absolutely beautiful film. I can't recommend it highly enough. Again, his editing, his shot composition, Joe Hishashi's music, it's just absolutely beautiful. And I believe, certainly in the UK, this is now down to a relatively cheap price, so I would jump on it. I watch my films on a projector on a wall, so if you can get the biggest screen you can to watch this and just immerse yourself in it, because it's just absolutely beautiful, and really quite moving, and it's just absolutely wonderful. So that's Dolls, the highest ranking Kitano film without Kitano in them. And number 3, which might be a bit high for other people, is Violent Cop, his debut, which again, like I said, I did a random review of. It's just absolutely fantastic. I mean, again, expressionistically, it's not his best. This is more because of the fatalism of the main character, played by himself, as a cop who's just determined to kill the baddie. But as a statement on violence, it's one of the best, because again, there's a scene where he does go to slow motion as a baseball bat is about to hit one of the cops' head, and then he quickly cuts to full speed, and you hear the sound of bat on skull. There's no score the way conventional films or Hollywood films would do during the fight sequence, and it's painful to watch as somebody gets the shit kicked out of them, basically. He does violence so well because he does it realistically and he doesn't stylize it. It's horrible, it's bleak. There's another scene where he's chasing one of the villains, and they're in a tussle, and accidentally the villain's gun goes off and just shoots somebody who's standing at a bus stop. It's just that burst of unpredictable violence, because that's what violence is. Innocent bystanders don't matter, because bullets can go anywhere, and it's something you don't really see in other films. You don't really see that kind of reality of violence. But again, when filmmakers do violence properly, they get into trouble. If you stylize it or do like James Bond or Star Wars, and that's fine, but if you actually do it properly, you get into trouble. But Violent Cop, I mean, I'll admit it's not his best film, but it's one of my favourites just because of the sheer fatalism and nihilism involved. It's just absolutely wonderful. And you know, as the corruption stops, it just begins again with somebody else. This certainly is his bleakest film. There's not a lot of light in it at all. There's probably less of his trademark humour involved with it. It's just straight down the line bleak, and it's awesome. So number 2 is probably one of his most celebrated, and it's Hanabi. I have 2 versions of Hanabi just to make sure, just in case one of them doesn't work. And this is the third window release. and this is absolutely fantastic. You've probably all seen this, but if you haven't, this is a good place to start your Kitano journey. It's about a cop, and he leaves the force due to an incident, and he looks after his dying wife. Granted, that sounds fantastic, but it is fantastic. Again, Kitano mixes in his own paintings. One of the other cops who's forced to retire for other reasons, he becomes a painter. It's shot so beautifully. Again, it's edited so well, and it's got a heart, which again, critics might say not all of his films do have a heart, but this one's got a heart. Again, it's got unpredictable violence, and this is kind of, like I said, if you're going to start your Kitano journey, this is probably the place to start. This has everything that makes Kitano so good. It has everything that makes Kitano one of the most singular directors in the world. You can tell it's a Kitano film. The black comedy's there, the outburst of violence is there, and the kind of poetic, expressionistic, colourful palette is there. It's just a truly great film, and it's probably in my top 50. So finally we get to number 1, and again, people might argue, but my personal favourite Kitano film is Sonatine. Again, this is on DVD. I think there is a Blu-ray somewhere, but I think it was quite expensive. I think it's German, but again, this deserves a third window release. And again, Sonatine, he plays a gangster who displeases his boss, so he gets sent out to this island. Not this island. He gets sent to the coast to kind of sort out a dispute out there. And so this kind of starts as a standard Yakuza film, kind of ends as a standard Yakuza film, but in between you just have the characters playing on the beach and messing around, and with Joe Hishashi's score, it's just a beautiful little film. Again, it takes its own time, it's not in any hurry. I saw this in a cinema in London. This is from 1993, and again was just completely blown away by it. I think this was the second of his films I saw after Violent Cop, and the difference as far as the colour and energy in it. Violent Cop is a very dark film, subject matter and the way it's shot. It's not a lot of colour involved, not a lot of light. Whereas obviously in Sonatine, they're on the beach. You know, the palette is remarkable. Again, you know what you're getting with Kitano. Just black comedy, sudden bursts of violence, and a kind of nihilistic, fatalistic view, certainly of his character. And the way it turns out, it's almost as though Kitano can't justify giving his own characters kind of freedom or a quote happy ending. Yeah, I'm not going to say any more about the ending of it. But this is, you know, a film that you can see, wow, this is a director, knows what he's doing, knows what he wants, and this is a director you're going to have to keep an eye out for. So that's my number 1 Kitano film. Please let me know what your top 10 Kitano films are. He is a director But again, you could argue, you know, half of his films are one thing, half of his films are another thing. He doesn't perhaps have the widest range of subject matter as other filmmakers might have. You could argue with his later Yakuza films he's maybe treading water a little bit, but certainly in his more expressionistic kind of experimental films, he did one called Takeshi's where there was 2 of them, which didn't quite work but was certainly interesting to watch. He is always interesting, and that's all you can hope for really as a filmmaker. So please let me know in the comments below what your top 10 would be, or what's the Kitano film that you would recommend to somebody who's never seen a Kitano film. And thank you very much for watching. This is Solitude Ronin saying farewell.